All right. Happy Friday Eve, everyone. So we are back once again for our monthly C3 panel discussion. And of course, we bring some colorful characters along with us to play in the sandbox that are expert subject matter in their own rights. And we're going to have some fun today talking around personality styles, assessments, all that good stuff that everybody loves as a candidate or to give to your future employees. But before we get going, I want to definitely create space for the C3 organizer, founder, Karen Huller, to basically give the mission vision of what C3 is and why we're here today. So Karen, take it away.
Thank you, Lawrence. And thank you, Al, for being here. And we do have another panelist planned, and we're just looking out for her coming in. The C3 community was originally founded because there's such a spirit sometimes of competition that is inhibitive of creating the world we want. So we wanted to create a space for people who are aligned in co-creating a better world through conscious leadership. And if you have somebody in your world who is aspiring for the same things, we ask you to please invite them to the community. What we're doing here is sharing the special sauces, the best practices, the things that some people and some companies are doing really well to create that. So it's not a secret anymore. Let's all use it. Let's all share it. Let's get the knowledge out there. Let's get the application out there. Let's give each other support. We're also creating a safe space. This is a very tough time for leadership. You're going to be leading people who are on both sides of everything and having to bring them together. So let's work together to bring everybody together to move everything forward. Thank everybody for being here, and thank you, Al, for being here. I'd love to talk more about leveraging personality and strength assessments in order to better consciously lead your team. Al, can you tell us a little bit about your background and experience?
Yeah, like Lawrence, I'm a former military officer, combat veteran. And then after that, I spent about 5 years in manufacturing management in the supply chain aerospace industry. And then after that, I spent about 25 years in human resources, doing global roles at places like Dell Computer, Nike, Blue Cross, GlaxoSmithKline. And then for the past 12 years, I've been on my own as a consultant. I consider myself an organization development consultant specializing in diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, and change. I'm also a certified coach and process improvement specialist.
So I got some questions. I am on the fence about assessments in general. And the reason why I say that, I've been on the good and bad ends of assessments. I've been the victim of, and I've also been the one that, I actually, it benefited me to have an assessment come out a certain way. But when people take assessments, I just want to get clear the air. Are people supposed to take them in accordance with what they desire to be or how they are currently in current state? How are people supposed to take assessments?
Who's that question to me?
That's to you, Karen. That's to the audience. That's to anybody. Does anybody have the keys to that ring?
Okay, I'll pause and defer to others first. So.
Oh, definitely jump in now. You're the expert panelist, so we definitely want to hear from you. I'll add my notes from my own experience as a career coach, but I'd love to hear what you think about whether they're harmful or helpful, or what is their role? How should we? What kind of credence should we give them? And as Lawrence asked, really the first question: should we be answering these questions on these assessments? And I know that there are many of them. Some of them are more personality assessments, and some of them are more strength assessments. I've even seen energy assessments. But what is a spirit that people should be completing them in that is the most helpful for leading them?
Well, so my practical advice and professional advice is that you need to be clear and understand the instructions, because it'll tell you in the directions, should you answer this as you currently are in current state, or should you answer this from a future state. So number one, I would always say be clear and make sure you understand the instructions. And typically you're going to have someone who's certified in that instrument or that assessment, and you can ask them questions about that as well. On average, typically what I've seen with most of them is that they want you to answer it as you currently are. That's what I've seen. But if there's something different, I would say follow the default instructions that come along with that instrument. And also, if you have questions, talk to someone who's certified in that instrument or assessment, and they can also address your specific questions. That's how I would respond to that.
Okay, so just to recap, it's really based on whatever the desired intention is. What's the intention? What's the purpose? Who's having you take this? What are they supposed to glean from this?
Exactly.
Okay, great. Now so as Lawrence was kind of alluding to, he's been a victim of them, which I like that phrasing. You've been a victim of them. You know, I've never gone through the process of getting certified in any of these methodologies, mostly because I've seen them vary from time to time. I've seen people who have been in roles for 15 years who have been directed to build strengths that were not necessarily innate in order for them to thrive in a certain environment. And for them, it was swimming upstream. Like one particular client I can think of said, I feel like I'm working harder to accomplish less because I'm expected to be strong in these areas that are not natural to me. But from their leadership perspective, you know, they gave this person an assessment and said, here's where we've identified that you have a gap between where you need to perform and where you are. And so they set this person up with the proper training and coaching to fill that gap. And he did. But in the end, he's coming to me because he feels like he could be more successful in a different environment where he could apply his innate strengths and skills and, you know, ultimately, not feel so inhibited by the mandate, I guess you could call it, to fill that gap. So where have you seen assessments lead people in a way that maybe not natural? Or how does a leader deal with that gap? Is that a proper application of assessments?
Yeah. Well, so I always feel like, you know, a leader or an individual shouldn't throw their hands up and just give up, right? To me, it's a combination of self-awareness, valid feedback, and giving it your best effort. For example, if I know that I'm not good at public speaking, right, that I get really nervous and I make all kind of, you know, unnatural mistakes and those kinds of things, but my job really requires me to do that. Number one, am I aware of my gaps in that area? Do I have feedback around that? Have I received coaching, training, practice, mentoring, and even seen what success looks like in that area? And then what accommodations might I need in those instances? For example, let's say Lawrence is a mentor of mine or a colleague and he's really strong in public speaking. Might we co-facilitate something, right? And I kind of focus on pieces that I'm strong with, and I give Lawrence maybe the lion's share or pieces that I feel more nervous about, you know, those kinds of things. So I just always recommend, I guess I'm the eternal optimist, you don't give up, you get real data, you understand what your gaps are, and then you leverage what you can do, right? And get any help or accommodations that you need. That doesn't mean you don't get the training, you don't get the coaching, you don't get the mentoring. You know, you got to do your part, right? But you got to realize, okay, I'm not a PhD statistician, so maybe I need to go hire one or get some assistance with one because I'll look like a fool, you know, trying to explain standard deviations and those kinds of things when I really don't know what I'm talking about. So I've got to be true with who I am and what I bring to the table and get the help where I need it.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, Al, particularly around. I always think about myself in the seat of the candidate, right? And we have all these pre-employment assessments, and you know, how will this person fit inside of an organization? And we look for culture fit and all these other things. But you have to think about the season of COVID that we're still in. and so many people out of work. And I recall my first several organizations, I was given these assessments, but once I, was lucky enough and fortunate enough to be hired on, beginning to understand the back ends of understanding how they were being read and how they were being interpreted. And as your talent acquisition folks, if you get a certification in the assessments and the interpretation or debriefing of these assessments, making sure that, one, you check your own current biases as you're looking at certain meters and measures, because there was one in particular in several organizations where they lived and died by the results of an assessment. And if a person leaned this direction, oh, they were the perfect candidate for this department, and they would shift and they would move. But then there was also another part where your tone in which you debrief assessment results. And so, like Karen, to your point of, hey, if we're looking for that statistician or that person with strong analytical skills, but there's also the tone of, well, this may be a little bit impression management, right? Well, if I'm looking for a job, there's going to be some impression management. Like I'm trying to put my best foot forward. And so to me, that's not a negative thing. But for the interpreters and the debriefers of these assessments, what would be helpful is what questions now exist to give a hiring manager or to give a panel to say, hey, this is an area of interest. You might want to create some questions around this area. And to me, that's where I believe these assessments become helpful as an indicator, kind of that lagging indicator, if you will. But it's not an end all be all. It's just more tools and resources to help us get closer to what we're desiring to have in an organization. So as far as the ones that are out there now, right, there are thousands of them now. And Al, I understand you have your own assessment based on your background. Karen, you have your own assessment based on your background. Why is it a thing? Where did these assessments come from, and why are they important today? Al, you can start with you, and then Karen, I know you're gonna jump in.
Yeah. Well, I have, and I'll preface this by saying, there's really, in my opinion, Lawrence and Karen and everyone, a 7-step process that I think anybody can use any assessment feedback. And so the first step is, what do you want? Right? So again, going to Lawrence's question, why or how might these assessments be useful, right? What do I even want, right? What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? What am I trying to become, right? So that's really step one. The second step is, well, why do I even want that, right? Because if I don't have a reason to get out of bed every morning or something that's really going to drive me passionately, I might need to go back to step one. What do I really want, right? Because this thing has got to drive me. And then I got to get clear on, what does success look like, right? What does it look like, sound like, feel like, and how do I know, right? How do I know if I'm winning or losing, right? And then here's where the assessments come in, right? What obstacles or challenges might be in my way, right? Because if I can't glean, some feedback from an individual or from an assessment to say what's in my way and have some valid and reliable information that really clarifies that, then I might just be all over the place, right? Going back to, what do I want? Why do I want it? What does success look like? So what's in my way, right? And that's where the assessments can be helpful. So that's really the answer to the question. But to finish the rest of this 7-step process out, then the question becomes, well, what's the goal, right? When I look at the goal in that feedback and I do that gap analysis, oh, okay, here's what I want. Here's what success look like. Here's what's in my way based on this assessment feedback. And so here's the gap analysis. So now I can focus on the critical few of things that are in my way based on what I want, right? Then the last 2 steps are, I create that personal growth and development plan, right? And I schedule that and get some weekly feedback, get whatever training, mentoring, feedback, and all of that I need. And then lastly, maybe do a weekly assessment myself. How am I doing against what I want versus how am I addressing the gap versus what I'm actually accomplishing? So in my opinion, Lawrence, Karen, and everyone, That's the value or the benefit of assessments. What's the difference between where I'm at versus where I want to go and what's in my way? And instead of me telling myself a story in my head, I got this external, valid, and reliable feedback to kind of tell me if I'm winning or losing. I'll stop there.
Love it, love it, love it. Karen, what you got on this?
Well, I waver back and forth because like there's, like you were saying, there's so many different assessments, right? We have there's hard skills, there's soft skills. Again, I've even seen energy assessments, and it's I totally agree with Al. You definitely have to start with what are you trying to get out of it, and then but I think there's two different parties here. Well, there's probably more than two parties, but if we think about the job seeker who's, looking to figure out how they can create the conditions under which they'll thrive the most, then, it's starting with them. It's not starting with this is what I want to be. How do I fill the gap? It can be that this is where I want to go. Like you were saying, you were using the example of public speaking. If what you ultimately want to be is a professor at a university, then you're going to have to fill that gap, right? You're going to have to fill the gap of public speaking. Absolutely. But public speaking is like a hard skill, right? So then there's the soft skills, but there's also all of the limited belief and self beliefs that come into play, where you could potentially fool yourself into thinking that you won't get strong in something because you haven't been strong at something. So that's where I feel like as a job seeker, as a person who wants to be intentional about managing their own career, to not disqualify career options because you haven't been strong in something, but instead to take these assessments and say, maybe I have some strengths that I haven't tapped yet. And to take these assessments and say, let me see if there's something that could be innate or identified about me that I just haven't had the opportunity yet to apply or use or test myself in. But also to not use even the results of that as the litmus test on whether you're going to be viable in that career or not. Because it can really be hard to delineate between these are my hard skills, the things that I've gotten experience in, the things that I've had a chance to test and try and develop. And then these are the things that come naturally to me. And also that's just doing things. There's also the way I think, the way you process information, what gives you energy, what takes away energy. I mean, that's Myers-Briggs is really about, what is swimming upstream, what's swimming downstream, and people waver. I waver, within those four letters, sometimes, especially the E and the I and the last two, the P and J. But it's really it's hard to say there's one thing that's going to be great for you. One assessment. There's the anagram, right? There's the Myers-Briggs. There's the Strengths Finders, and the DISC profile. I mean, there's so many different things. I think if you're looking at your purposes from the first side, from you managing your own career, not necessarily from the company you're working at managing your career and your development in that direction, what is going to work best for you? So, Al, I want to throw it back to you and say, from your perspective, what would you say are the various purposes, speaking from the delineation of hard skills, soft skills, the way we think and process information, the things that give and take energy. What are the different applications of the various assessments from that perspective?
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. The only thing that I would add that's different is I don't know if you said, or maybe I missed it, leadership effectiveness, right? When you think about the impact of a person's leadership skills and not only their skills but also their personality, right? Because Lawrence and I are certified in a tool called energy leadership, and it's really based on the premise that energy attracts like energy, and that we learn that, and we coach leaders to understand that you can bring the energy of a group or an interaction up or down based on how you show up, because what's happening is our thinking, our emotions or feelings and our behavior, they're all connected, right? So it really starts with that person's thinking. So the leadership effectiveness one, and looking at that person holistically, both personally and professionally, is one that I spend a lot of time on as a leadership coach, personally. And there is obviously an assessment that goes along with it. There's these 7 levels of energy, right? And there's and it's all energy, right? We don't look at any of it as positive or negative. It just is, right? The key is that there's advantages and disadvantages to how you decide to show up at any given time, right? Whether it's I'm deciding to show up as a victim. You go, wait a minute, Al, what's the advantage of that? Well, guess what? I might want some TLC from someone who's close and special to me. Like, oh, Yvonne, my wife, Karen and Lawrence really wore me out today on that on that live broadcast. I just need a glass of wine and a shoulder rub, right? So, I'm making a decision to show up a certain way to get more of what I want in the moment. And that's what I love about energy leadership. It doesn't pigeonhole you in any particular way. Oh, you're an I, you're a T, you're a J, you're this strength, you're this, you're that. No, it says, yeah, here's the way you may show up on a default basis, if you will. But here's what's available to you, right? So decide in the moment of choice, what do you really want right now? Why do you want it? And how might you use your energy in this moment to get more of what you want? So that leadership, holistic presence is one where I spend a lot of time, and I think you get big utility out of that when you understand that, when you're aware of that, and when you decide to make choices around
it. Yeah.
I've never heard of energy leadership before. I've definitely, in the world of even just, quantum physics and all of that, that which is part of the even neuroscience of things that I study. I think that's so in alignment with, with the awarenesses that there can be complete gaps in, like the fact that I've never heard of energy leadership, but it seems like it's especially now where we have all of the, right when we started our call, the things that were on my mind as I was coming to this call were all the things that have been taking my energy all these past 3 days, right? And to be mindful of that and to say, these are all the things that are available to me. Can you bring us into a practical application of how you take what's going on right now in this world for leaders and what they're experiencing for themselves and what they're experiencing for their teams, and talk us through? And you too, Lawrence, I didn't know you had this certification. That's amazing. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of awesomeness yet to unfold for me to learn about you. But talk us through the application of like what's happening right now and how a leader can apply this energy leadership methodology to help them show up the way they're needed to show up today.
Yeah. So I'll take a stab at it first before you jump in. So let's just take this week, this point in time. In 2016, as HR professionals, nobody took into account how important it would be for leaders to know how to react to the day after election. And leading up to this, all the visceral reactions that people were having from an energy perspective. And as a leader of people, you choosing to or not to check your own personal opinions and emotions and all that leading up to the election. And so when we talk about energy leadership, just talking about level 1 and level 2, those being kind of the energy suckers, the catabolic energies. And when to shift up or down, how long is it taking you to shift? And are you aware of when you're there in those energy sucking, draining levels, right? And then the identification, not just from an evaluation standpoint, but an observation standpoint. So in coaching, we ask a person like, so how are you feeling? Not just emotion wise, but where are you feeling a thing at? Like, do you have a pit in your stomach? Is your head hot? Are your fingers tingling? What are you aware of what your body is telling you as a reaction to the energy that you're projecting? And then from an observation and feedback gathering standpoint, how are others experiencing you from an energy perspective? Because if you're not aware, and I can recall being Captain Henderson, I would walk into a room as a presence. I had a level 2 anger, roll my shoulders back, somebody about to get chewed out energy. And what that would do, that caused anxiety for everybody else that was in the room with me, where I was thinking everybody needed to project what I was projecting. Their experience with that previously caused them to have other reactions. And at the time, because I wasn't aware, I just kept doing it because it was getting me results. Well, now that I understand energy leadership, coaching, they were operating under a fight or flight kind of victim energy where I got what I wanted when I wanted it, but it wasn't healthy. It wasn't sustainable. And so right now it's the same sort of things happening in this world. No, everybody's walking around on eggshells. They don't know how to respond to things or respond to people based on how it's been received in the past. And most of us in business, politics, you leave that at the door, unless you're for a certain candidate or you're for the candidate of your supervisor. That's the only way you could talk about politics, right? Religion. Now that everything is on the noodle, everything is free game, people are having these energy reactions, good, bad, and different, to what's happening. And so that's where I'm seeing it real time, is just a lot of level 1 victim, little fight or flight, or that level 2, everybody, I'm ready for it. I'm game. You want all the smoke? I'm with you. Dukes up. But again, none of it all being bad, but understanding the uses of the energy when it's time, right? Understanding level 2, adrenaline is there, right? That fight or flight, and it's useful in context. But then as you navigate through higher and higher levels of energy, you understand the opportunities that open up to you when you actually look at a situation based on a different playing field and from a different vantage point. Al, how'd I do?
You nailed it, man. I mean, I I don't have a lot to add with that. The only thing I would just try to supplement what Lawrence says, because I agree with everything he said about that. Again, he and I went through the same coach training and accreditation program. Couple of things I would throw in there. Awareness, I think, is key, right? Because if I'm not, going back to your question, Karen, how do you use energy leadership in the here and now? With the election, with the divisiveness in the country, with racial unrest and police brutality, with economic pressure, with the global pandemic. We got stuff coming at us from every direction. And on top of that, if you're in charge, if you're a leader, you've also got the responsibility of getting stuff done through people. On top of all this stuff that's seeping into your organization, seeping into the conversations on people's minds, whether they speak about it or not, right? So it's a lot. It's absolutely a lot. And so what I try to hold myself to, and how I try to show up, and also when I'm trying to help and coach others, a couple of key things come to mind. Number one, are you even aware of how you're showing up? Are you aware and even providing yourself the self-care that you need, right? Especially as a leader, right? You're up there at the top. You're by yourself. You're not having conversations a lot of times with your peers, or you might be the only one in your organization who's like you in your role. So that self-awareness is the first one. I'm not looking in the mirror. Number two, being aware of your judgment, right? Because you think about a lot of stuff we're talking about, politics, religion, the pandemic. Do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? What does that mean? All of that, right? Is it a mask? Is it a political symbol? All of that stuff that comes up, right? So am I even aware of the judgment that I'm having about stuff that I'm seeing and experiencing? Because like I said earlier, your thinking, your feelings and emotions, and your behavior, they're all connected. So if I'm starting with that judgment, I'm already, going down the right path or the wrong path if I'm in my own head, right? Versus meeting you where you're at. Because with that judgment, the thing that we have to realize is that people are probably doing the best they can do with what they've been given. That's the caveat. Karen is doing the best she can do with what she's been given. Lawrence is doing the best he can do. Al is doing the best he can do with what he's been given. And guess what? We've all been given different things. We have different experiences, different backgrounds, different values, and that's okay, right? But if I'm judging you based on how you're showing up versus realizing and saying to myself and believing, wow, Karen is doing the best she can do with what she's been given. So how do I meet her where she's at and do this thing we call task 1 and task 2 in organization development? Task 1 is, what is the work we came here to do? Task 2 is, how am I showing up and contributing to and impacting that work, right? So I've got to go back to self-awareness. And then I don't have to throw away my values, right? What's important to me is valid, right? I get to have a say in what's important to me. I get to stand in my own power. And I get to even talk about what my needs are, right? So that when we face that situation again, or we have this conversation again, or we have to get this task done again, you at least understand where I'm coming from. And guess what? I'm going to do my best to understand where you're coming from. And I think that's the thing that allows us to talk about anything. There's nothing off limits. Lawrence, I'll say to you, when you said, oh, you can't talk about politics, can't talk about, there's nothing off limits for me. You know why? Because I'm not judging the person. I'm going to meet them where they're at. I'm going to listen. I get to stick to my values. I get to talk about what my needs are. But, that's how we get closure. If we start by understanding each other and we start by sharing our mutual needs, we can talk about anything as far as I'm concerned. Because it's all in how I'm deciding to show up. It's all in the energy that I'm bringing to that conversation that allows us to facilitate any topic, any conversation. Because I'm not judging you. I'm realizing you're doing the best you can do, what you've been given, and I'm going to meet you and we're going to do this work.
Yeah, I love that, Al. And if I could just add chime back in, because another coach of that's also energy leadership coach, and I from IPEC as well. She's also a strengths practitioner as well. And I loved her description of being in energy from an energy perspective. When you read somebody's results, just because something didn't make it into your top 5 doesn't mean the other strengths aren't present. It's just how you navigate to them, and how you show up and how you experience the other strengths that are a part of that list of 34. And when she was describing, empathy as a background of being in IT and all the rest of that, she just made it to empathy differently, right? That meant she had to process 33 strengths first before she got to empathy. And in her mind, there was an order, there was a pecking order that she personally had to show up. And to your point, Al, what immediately comes up for me is the old Stephen Covey thing: assume the best until proven wrong. Yeah. And if we as leaders come into conversations, and I had to learn this, I had to unlearn some things that people were maliciously jacking stuff up. There was a level of not knowing. And so they, like you said, they were doing the best that they could. And it wasn't until I asked a question, I simply just asked, what made that the best option? And then you find out I was only working within the confines and the guardrails of my capacity. Mm-hmm. And so then I got really curious around organizational capacity and was like, okay, I now need to understand that I need to assess who's coming to me and with what. And so now if I know what's in your toolbox, I now know how I need to resource you individually as one of my team members. But then that goes to the conversation about equality versus equity. Okay, equality says you hand everybody the same tool and expect results, versus equity, let me see what you have and then resource you in accordance with what you have. That way I can then get you or bring you further along based on you actually meeting your actual individual needs. And so when these assessments, I believe leaders, and the one thing that I love to do when I got any assessment for any of my people, I needed to see what were they good at, praise them, give recognition, all the rest of that. Keep that a strength. I don't want that to go anywhere. I want you to keep killing that every single day. But what are the things that I can help resource? Okay, let's have conversations about what do they understand about this opportunity for improvement. And again, words matter, not a strength, not a weakness, but an opportunity for improvement, right? Understanding that words trigger people differently. And again, I'm speaking about myself. and so when you think about it that way and you use assessments as a tool to help you lead better, help you serve better, that to me is the power of why giving them in the first place is when they can be used as a tool to help you serve better.
I have a follow up to that. We've talked about so many things already around assessments, and I love it. And I can't wait to write this summary because we've hit this from so many different angles. Let's hit it from the building a team, hiring angle. So when you're on the hiring side, you recognize that finding the right fit is already a challenge. Right? When you bring, whether you're using a methodology that focuses on hard skills and then developing soft skills, or focusing on soft skills and developing hard skills. When I went to a Gallup, there was a local Gallup event, and I went there and I asked some questions and got to learn the different programs that they make available for people, and certification, as well as just, them as consultants coming in to help people build or better leverage their teams. The question was, do you use assessments in hiring, assessing your candidates before the fact, and then not necessarily discriminating against certain things, certain skills and weaknesses, because that's hard enough, right? You're already having a challenge finding the right pool of candidates, and then especially when you're focused on diversity, and then focusing within that diversity on making sure that you have diversity that's not just like a demographic diversity, but how people think, how people react. And then once you have those diverse people on your team, you have to be the leader that, as Al was saying, figuring out how to create a space where you can talk about anything, including all the things that all of these different diversity pieces come into play. So when it comes to the assessments in hiring, Al, do you use assessments in hiring? Do you recommend assessments in hiring, or do you recommend it being the hiring focused more on one thing versus another, and then using, as Lawrence was saying, using the assessments to figure out how best to resource your talent and how best to, as you were saying, meet them in the middle and bring them up to where they need to be?
Yeah. So I spent some time as a recruiter in corporate before moving on to different HR roles. And so I've seen assessments be used both from a technical and behavioral sort of perspective. Not a lot, to be honest with you, not a heavy use of it. But I've seen, some of them being used. And I got to be honest, I really prefer to use a hybrid method of traditional and behavioral style interviewing, right? Traditional, tell me about yourself, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, why do you want this job, blah, blah, blah. And then behavioral interviewing really being defined as past behavior is a predictor of future performance, right? And I might say something like, Lawrence, tell me about the last time you had to get something done and you flat out failed and you didn't get it done. Most people might get shocked about that. But if you really understood that question from a behavioral interviewing perspective, really the question is about applied learning. Tell me about something that didn't go well, and if you had a chance to do it a second time, or if you were to do it again, what, if anything, would you do different? That's really what I'm trying to assess. Now, if he were to say, oh, I've never failed in my life, Al, in my mind, that interview is over, because unless you're walking on water and you're 40 plus years old, you failed at something, right? And so under having that combination of behavioral and traditional style interviewing is really, the thing that I kind of go after in terms of assessing talent. And there's two other things that I do when it comes to ensuring that I have the right talent balance on a team. Number one, I'm typically assigning certain people on the interview panel to look for certain attributes and characteristics in a particular candidate, right? I might even say, okay, Karen, go for these hard skills since you're the IT guru. Lawrence, go for the leadership, since you're in the leadership role on the team that'll be interacting with this person. Then I'm going to go for, whatever, collaboration or what have you. So I'm assigning people certain attributes and characteristics to screen for, right? And we're going to debrief and talk about that and assess that. And then the last thing, in terms of how I answer your question, Karen, about having the right balance of personalities and those kinds of things on the team. Let's say that we don't have someone who's going to ask the hard questions. Like, we got a very agreeable group. We're all very extroverted. We all agree we can finish each other's sentences. We get along very well. I actually may assign a contrarian in a team meeting. Say, okay, Lawrence, I want you to be the devil's advocate today. I want you to ask us the opposite of everything that we're agreeing on. What about in this region? What about it with this type of customer? What about, whatever, that's the opposite, right? So if I don't have those natural differences on the team, I'll actually assign them in the moment. Karen, today you'll be the eternal optimist, right? I don't care what problem we think we can't get past. I want you to never give up on asking us, well, what about this solution? What about that solution? What about, so I'll when I'm missing, I'll actually assign it in the moment, right? And you might get a different hat next week or the next meeting. I don't want you to feel like, I can only see you as the devil's advocate or the eternal optimist or whatever. So yeah, that's how I approach those in the hiring as well as in the moment on the team.
I love that, Al. And that speaks to how I began to love the Myers-Briggs way to leverage the E and the I, right? And amongst a room full of the E's, you're going to have an introverted extrovert. Like there's going to be on the spectrum. Nobody's going to be, if you look at a little dot diagram, they're going to be all up and down the meter on the E. So I need to find the most, and then that characteristic exists. And so, like you said, assigning that, what you did is diversify ability in that meeting. And so for me, being generally, when in charge, take charge is our infantry background while we're in the military. So I was the biggest E in the room. But the skill for me was to pull on who was quiet. Not that person was introverted, but the introvert from an introspective point of view and say they're processing, not that they're shy, but they're processing. And so for me, it was my job to pull that person into the conversation, or it was before we went on to another point, it was for me to individually call every person's name in the room and say, Karen, what do you think? Al, what do you think? And give everybody that space to share, right? And then let's say Karen's, I don't got nothing right now, but come back to me. Okay, I make myself a mental note. I need to come back to Karen before. And okay, by the end of the meeting, going around the room, everybody gets their time. Hey, I know, Karen, you said you wanted me to come back to you and some things. Do you have your notes now? Because again, most of us don't process openly. At most extroverts, the stereotype is we process out loud. And so if you're not that person, if you're actually noticing a group of people, somebody's quiet. You've identified your extrovert and introvert.
Yeah.
Right. And so leaders becoming more aware of your surroundings and then being present. And are you observing the talent? And Karen, to your point about these assessments being taken, and I did an exercise with an engineering group, and there was a product development group, and they were looking at all of the types of people that were currently on the team. And as you broke them out, it was literally a pocket of the entire team was in one corner, and then you had ones like in these other corners, and it was based on the disc. But the leader was in that pocket of the group, and I said, how? And the funny part about it is the ones that were individually by themselves, they were new hires. That leader had an intention to say, I'm going to hire against the grain, because I understand the majority of my current team is like me. And she was like, and I can't stand it.
Mhm.
And so there becomes an awareness that the leader has to become comfortable being uncomfortable with them going outside of themselves to say, hey, we're never going to continue to push the envelope on innovation if I just keep surrounding myself with like-minded people. We're going to keep going in this same direction. And that's all all we're going to do is we're going to just go faster in that direction. And so now, to your point, we need somebody to slow us down. All right. When a meeting with everybody's like, yes, great idea. That meeting flies. That's a 15-minute meeting versus who's the person that's going to make this a 30-minute meeting? By just asking one well-timed question of, is that the best option? Right. And I think personality styles gives us indicators of, hey, we need that person in the room so that we understand are all, again, all is a generalization of everything's going to make it out on the table. But based on the team we have, did we kick around ideas from different perspectives?
Right. Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Along the same lines of diversity, when you're a leader and you've taken your own personality assessment, and maybe you've taken time, like for the past 14 years, I've been focused on helping people identify their self-limiting beliefs and breaking them down, and replacing those self-limiting beliefs and the behaviors and the habits and the results that they're getting based on those. Like, that's a strength of mine. And there are gaps like this. I love this energy leadership thing. It's totally something I'm probably going to dive into and learn a lot more about. But so that's my capability as a leader. I know that, but I'm also potentially, there's a risk and a danger in saying I'm going to hire people that have the weakness that I know that I can build, right? Do you see in leadership and your clientele and the people who are being served by you that this is something that leaders do? Is there a danger in it? How can a leader take this assessment and make sure that they're not flying blind to the other areas of development that they need to build in order to get people up to the level of performance that's needed to do the job they're there for?
Yeah, I think that you can never. I'm into sort of having multiple variables, multiple data variables, right? And that also includes multiple types of assessment, right? Or things that gives you feedback. Because you might have a mentor, you might have a coach, you might have a personality, individual feedback tool or instrument, that you can use. And then you even have what I call a process called feed forward, right? Which is another variable. And I can't claim, ownership or, the origination of this. This is something I got from a book by Marshall Goldsmith, one of the most successful coaches probably in the world. I think he only coaches maybe 5 top Fortune 100 CEOs a year. And, he's doing quite well with that. But he had this book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And in this book, there's a very practical 1-page instrument called feed forward process. And here's how it works. Again, in the auspices of multiple variables, right? And so this could be one variable. And so the feed forward process works like this. You say, okay, Lawrence, I believe that you know me well, and I believe you have my best interest at heart. I got this assessment or this coach, and they gave me some feedback. And one of the things I'm working on is presence, executive presence. Let's say I'm working on that. And, it was identified that I might have a potential gap in this particular aspect on this particular aspect of executive presence. So I've been working on this for the past 6 months. And what I would like to hear from you is, what's your feedback to me on executive, how I'm showing up in the area of executive presence? He's going to say what he's going to say. I can have a 2-word response only. And that is thank you, right? For that feedback. Because what's happening now is, I've gotten all the coaching, I've gotten all the assessment, I've gotten all of that, and I've started to do my work in my coaching development plan or what have you. Now I get to go out and validate, am I making progress? Am I getting better? Am I getting worse? Or am I staying the same? And so when I go out to my network of people who know me and have my best interests at heart, who spend time with me, they will tell me, yep, Al, you're doing better in this area. No, Al, you're doing worse in this area. Yeah, Al, you're staying the same in this area. And to make that work, I can't be defensive. I can't be debating with him. I can't go back and forth. I may be even buying him a cup of coffee or some lunch while I'm getting this feed forward, so to speak, right? And other than that, it doesn't cost me a dime. I don't have to pay for another assessment. I don't have to pay a coaching fee. It's just, do you know me? Do you have my best interest? Are you going to be objective and give me real feedback? How do you think I'm doing? So that's my long-winded answer, Karen, just to say, you need more than one variable, when you're getting these assessments and these feedback, because sometimes, maybe someone is biased. Maybe is the tool even valid and reliable, right? So how do I have multiple variables to tell me how I'm actually doing? So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I love that, Al. And I keep saying it. I keep throwing them out there and giving them shout outs. The practitioner side of neurolinguistics, and I'm a huge believer in. And me and you talked about this just the other day. And the understanding of how words trigger people and their desire to engage in an activity, like something like feedback. And so the recoding and reframing of feed forward is potentially a trigger that won't arm people, but it'll get them to put their hands down and say, okay, I can make myself available for this feed forward thing, even though we know it's feedback. It's just in the way that your brain is processing. And again, all of us as coaches, if you were introduced to corporate coaching, most people were introduced to coaching as a part of a performance improvement plan. And so when people say, I'm getting you a coach, they're like, what did I do? I mean, I didn't think I was doing that bad. Why do I need a coach? I'm like, no, you've been identified as a high potential, right? And those were the only two extremes in which people got coaching: high potential, executive, or you one step from being out the door. And so you had all these coaches, if they were external, that came into an organization, a part of the performance improvement plan, and a part of employee relations. And so it was one of those things like, I don't really want that. But as we think about recoding and reframing things as we move forward, assessments aren't a bad thing. It's just, how are we using them as a tool? And then are we making sure that, like you said, collecting the data and using the data in a very positive way that's impacting the organization, not being a hindrance per se. Karen, what are some of your final thoughts as we begin to wrap this up?
My next question was actually going to be around how do we package these assessments in order to make them more palatable for people, and also, how can we even just package just coaching in general? So you just answer that. It was a perfect little wrap up with a bow. At this point, I want to thank everybody who's made it on here. I absolutely want to thank Lawrence, who's an amazing partner in these events. And I look forward to these time we get to spend every month. And Al, I'm so happy to make your acquaintance. And I thank you for being here and being a presence in our C3 community and sharing your skills and your knowledge and your experience and your wisdom, and your case studies and all the things that we're exactly in this community for. If you're attending here through maybe Lawrence's LinkedIn page, please go to the C3 community in LinkedIn. It's called the Corporate Consciousness Co-op. It's for people who want this kind of ongoing education continual leveling up, but also co-creating a leveled up ripple effect in the corporate landscape overall. So please join us in that community. If you have your own skills, expertise, experience, case studies that you want to share, success stories, failure stories, doesn't matter. If it's out there to help us build a different corporate landscape that's going to better leverage the talent and shape a culture in corporate America that's going to move us forward move the needle to a better place than where we're at right now, then please come into our community, introduce yourself, tell us what you're an expert at. What we do is we take all these pieces of expertise and we put them in a survey, and survey our community to say what is relevant and needed for you to know right now. And we make that our next topic. And then we go out and we go to our community and we say, great, you're the expert at this. This is something that you said you're an expert in. Please come with us and be our next panelist. And then we'll go out and, as Lawrence did, invite Al into the community, into this event to share his expertise. And it's growing organically. It's not like we're inviting everybody. I'm excited that we're reaching the 100 member mark in the community. And it's just that ripple effect that we hope to create, just to gradually grow it and have other aspiring conscious leaders and conscious leaders invite more conscious leaders and move that needle towards a positive, better world for everybody. So thank you, everybody who was here live and commenting. I really appreciate it. It's great to know when you're here, that you're getting value from this as well. If you got value from this, please share this. We're going to play this. We're going to put this replay in a summary in our C3 community, and we're going to promote people to come to the C3 community to watch the replay. Of course, you'll be able to see it on Lawrence's LinkedIn page as well, though the shelf life of those posts is not all that great. So just come into the community to watch the replay. And of course, Al, can you just tell people, quickly how they can reach out to you if they have found a lot of value in your experience and they want to be able to take advantage of that?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Karen. And thank you, Lawrence, also for inviting me. And it's been great to participate here today. You can find me on LinkedIn at Al Sullivan at inspiresconsulting.com. That's my website. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. Al at inspiresconsulting.com. That's my email. And Inspires is spelled INSPIRUS. Al at inspiresconsulting.com.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Lawrence. Have a great month. See you next month. There'll be some training in the meantime, too. So pop into C3. Look forward to seeing everybody.
See everybody soon.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.